Quickly, Alex, let's welcome you to today's news. And of course, if the state is going to have absolute power, it must have control of the legal system.
Indeed, it must. As I was listening to Ben there, I was reminded of the first instance of the third way being adumbrated in politics well before the 90s, with Anthony Giddens telling Blair and Clinton's advisors telling him to put it into practice. It was a post-war Nazi continuation strategy best written about by Joseph Farrell. The third way in their conception was keeping the Americans and the Soviets out of the picture while a corporato-fascist system was redeveloped in Europe. And as regards what Ben just closed with on the National Health Service, I think Thomas Sowell, the famous American commentator, said it best. He said, it amazes me that people don't think, he's talking about America, people don't think they can afford healthcare, but they do think that they can afford healthcare plus a massive inefficient government bureaucracy to run it. And that's just what that meme Ben shared was about. Now, the legal society, particularly the jurisdiction of England and Wales, as we have several jurisdictions in the United Kingdom, the in-house journal for English and Welsh solicitors, the Law Society Gazette, reports that there is now, it's in consultation period until the end of November, but it is likely to go through. There is now going to be an imposition, a requirement on the barristers, that is the trial lawyers, the attorneys in this jurisdiction, to go beyond not treating anyone unfairly, which is currently what they have to sign up to in Article 8 of their Code of Practice, but they have positively to go for woke fascism, as Ben has just put it, particularly the wokeism. They have to go for DEI, diversity and inclusion, not further defined, of course. The same journal is rather gleeful in reporting this apparent victory, I would suggest a Pyrrhic victory, for the legal system of England and Wales against the Yorkshire lawyer Lois Yvonne Bayliss. Lois Bayliss, who runs a practice called Broad Yorkshire Law, was brought to a solicitor's disciplinary tribunal because she wrote, not acting under instructions from a client, but out of concern for children and using her legal knowledge, she wrote to a number of schools, pointing out to them, this is the key bit that you will not read in the Law Society Gazette. What she pointed out to them was that there was no possible way during the inoculation campaign for COVID-19 in schools that informed consent, the legal requirement, going all the way back to Nuremberg, informed consent could not possibly be required. That was not proven at her disciplinary tribunal to be a misleading statement. No matter what is claimed about it. Last week, Charles Mallet brought out an excellent interview with Claire Wills Harrison, who's leaving the legal profession in England and Wales, an interview called The Wonky Scales of Justice. And there, the same point was made that the SRA, an unfortunate acronym for those of us who know its other meaning, but the Solicitors Regulation Authority, had become welded at the hip with power. It's the legal reflex of what we've just heard about in the corporate world, knowing which side your bread's buttered and imposing the will of power upon your own profession, which you're supposed to be there to represent, or regulate, as they now call it. It's supposed to be representation, ultimately. So do listen to that in order to understand what's going on here with the SRA. What's going on here in detail then? Well, it'll all be in the show notes as usual. This is the letter from the beginning of 2022, which Lois Bayliss wrote from her practice to schools with regard to the COVID immunization service visits, pointing out simply that they owe a legal obligation to each child in their care. Again, this wasn't overturned. In a very questionable couple of points of nicety, it was upheld at this disciplinary tribunal that Lois Bayliss had breached some requirements of her profession, which leaves her with the possibility of being stung for a very large legal bill. But the point that she's keen to emphasize is that it was not found to be wrong in science, in fact, or in law that the informed consent could not be obtained by the schools in this jab drive. That is really the victory, the hill that she was prepared to die on. She has put out a statement. I won't read it in full. People can freeze it to find out what's going on here. But she's keen to emphasize that for the sake of the children, and this was cynically quoted in the headline of the Law Society Gazette, I did it for the children in scare quotes, but good on her for going that far and saying that. She put this on record. She was being threatened, but it was not proven that what she'd written was misleading or anything else. She was accused of damaging public trust and confidence in her profession, which is often how dissident doctors are stung by their regulators in various Western jurisdictions. And at the end of it, you can see that the date is the 5th of September. So just at the end of last week, she says she still has to find £32,500 to pay, and she has to pay her own costs around £60,000. But it's all worth it if even one child was not jabbed with a harmful substance because of it. So with no reservation whatsoever, I share, and it will be in the show notes, her fundraiser. As you can see, she's at the halfway point in raising the 100,000 that she needs to cover the likely or confirmed legal expenses she now faces as a result of this. Now, Mike Yeadon, in sharing this, was keen to point out that this shows that you can't put any incriminating evidence on record against the system. And I take his point. She was stymied at every turn. But I don't think it was ill-advised of her to face up to this disciplinary tribunal and to flush out the admission that there was nothing misleading about the points she made about informed consent, because that's the bedrock of the legal profession, of course, is to ensure that fundamental human rights, as they're now called, are honoured. What's going on then with different parts of the United Kingdom? Well, Fox News in the USA has picked up that in a continuation of what Charles Mallet has been reporting on from Birmingham and and Brighton in England, we now have a spread even to Northern Ireland of people being arrested for silent prayer about outside abortion clinics. In this case, the Causeway Hospital in Coleraine, County Antrim, a lady called Claire Brennan there. I haven't seen much domestic coverage of this. While we stay in Northern Ireland, in County Fermanagh, Southwest College there, I think based in Enniskillen, has announced to its sixth formers, as we used to call them in old speak, the school leaving 2 years, that they're invited to participate in a carbon literacy program. I won't read this out either, but it looks like you get brownie points with your future employers if you have joined the Carbon Jugend while you are still at school. That's how I read it. Where is this all leading? Well, a popular account called Drukpa Kunle, or Kunle Drukpa, has been pointing out some old 1980s clips by the Singaporean Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew, the strongman of that city-state as it catapulted itself to first world status in the latter half of the 20th century after independence from Britain. And it's popular in a certain sphere of the dissident circles to say, well, he was quite right. He needed to intervene and interfere with people's private lives in the way that Ben has just been outlining. If we hadn't fiddled with people's private lives, he says, we wouldn't be here today. And Chris Koncz has been pointing out in a Substack note that, and he's very sympathetic to Lee Kuan Yew, that this is absolutely what we need to do. We've got to clamp down. But he says that when British politicians said they wanted to build Singapore on Thames after Brexit, they weren't joking. What does this entail? Well, if you just take the freedom of religion aspect of it, but one among many of the important aspects that need to be considered, you will see in a speech in, I think, 1987, that Lee Kuan Yew, after pouring cold water on freedom of religion by saying that not even Christian and not even Europeans are excited about Christianity, there's nothing to get excited about, he arrogantly says, as I put it in my post, which will be in the show notes to my Telegram channel, he says, firm government will ride through this patch, that means a rough patch. Soft government trying to accommodate everybody will lead to big mischief, he snarls as he ends his speech. So the Lee Kuan Yew, going full Singapore way is not a helpful path to take. It's already being taken, particularly by the Blairistas. We see here, just in passing, that the Speaker of the House of Commons has been telling BBC Radio 5 Live that there must be nobody saying anything nasty on social media. The Speaker of the House of Commons, for goodness sake. And on the question of whether the Prime Minister is driving all this, we see the BBC telling us that he's concerned about the increase in support for what he calls the far right across the channel over here on the continent. But he says in Britain, the answer to it is delivery in government. Ben has already pointed out a couple of Irish connections. I'll just mention this one as well, that the Border Security Command, which involves, of course, the Irish angle as well. He's there posing with them, having their backs to the camera like FBI strongmen, saying, we will smash the vile people smuggling gangs. That's really East Asian communist language, isn't it? And, just a week or two ago, if you said this, you were going to be on the wrong end of his prosecutors for saying the same thing. Here's one example, I think, from Liverpool, a lady called Ava, who says that she's just been visited by counter-terrorism police. No probable cause, no statement of wrongthink. She was just told, you are naughty, We won't give you details. We're going to steal your father's samurai sword because we genuinely believe it's a weapon, ho-ho. And they found a Roman helmet in the house, which they said, this is Anglo-Saxon and evidence of you being a far-right ethno-nationalist. So that's what going Singaporean means on people. Hansard, the parliamentary record, points out here that even Sir John Hayes, a fairly right-wing opposition MP, has to pull his punches when he asks the Speaker of the House, who controls government business, why is it that the higher education bill of the last government, free speech in universities, is now going to be repealed? And just zipping through these because of time, yes, you can freeze these if you want. The well-known legal firm Taylor Wessing has pointed out in these 4 slides that I'll zip through that the law has changed from the previous situation just this year because of the Online Safety Act. That we have covered this in the past, but I find this a good summary for people to freeze the frame. Of course, the Taylor Wessing goes along with the government narrative here, but it points out there are now obligations on online service providers to do effectively the government's bidding, and that courts have teeth. Look at this last bit. Courts now have jurisdiction to grant civil injunctions if they think that it would be just and convenient to do so. And we just got a silent video to go with that from Germany, which I'll play out now, which is here we see that people in Germany are being warned not to post anything that might be incendiary, and in this childish way they're being shown examples of, must share images and footage. And every time somebody shares this, for people watching in audio, a little fire is ignited along the way. And while this plays out, it gives me time to say that in the show notes, but not on the slides, there is very detailed description now by 2 of the best bloggers from the German-speaking world of a constitutional case that's now going to Germany's Supreme Court because a nurse in northwestern Germany has taken through her own court of first instance an objection that it was unconstitutional of her to have to prove COVID vaccination status in order to continue working as a nurse during the COVID panic. And the judges have referred this up to Karlsruhe, the Supreme Court there, saying that actually we think that there was no constitutionality in this matter because the Robert Koch Institute, the public health guidance people, have admitted now in court that they are political people. They took orders from the Ministry of Health, and all that they did was behaviour change. There was no science behind it. Of course, reporting on this is being clamped down upon, which is the very point we're trying to highlight here, that the state is going to go for you if you even voice any kind of dissidence now.
Alex, thank you very much for that comprehensive segment. A lot to think about. And of course, it's beholden on all of us to speak out and challenge what's happening.